the space economy for India is going to really be, a big value addition.
India, according to me, is the swing state.
One of the key aspects for ISRO to succeed has always been the low-cost launches that they have been doing over the years.
Welcome to the fourth episode of our podcast series, Transforming India, Road to 2047, presented by Ment in association with JSA. In this series, we explore various dynamic changes that are shaping the country's future and delve into sectors that are propelling the country's potential $30 trillion economy by 2047, sectors including technology and infrastructure to policy and innovation. This sector is expected to grow at a CAGR of 8% over the next decade. Joining us today are two experts with deep insights into the legal and policy frameworks that are underpinning the India's space ambitions. First, we have Tony Verghese, a partner at JSA Law with over 2 decades of experience in telecom and information technology sectors. Tony specializes in providing regulatory advice for establishing businesses in India, including licensing, technology agreements, and setting up operations in STPIs and SEZs. Tony also advises overseas companies on structuring business operations in India, assisting with complicated licensing procedures, statutory registration requirements, and general corporate compliances. We also have with us Gerald Manoharan, also known as Jerry, another partner at JSA Law with extensive expertise in corporate law, focusing on M&As, private equity, joint ventures, and general corporate advisory. Jerry leads the startup practice at JSA Law. He has advised diverse range of clients, including multinational corporations, private equity firms, and emerging companies on complex transactional and regulatory matters. Jerry is known for his strategic guidance in sectors such as technology, infrastructure, and manufacturing, helping businesses navigate legal complexities and achieve their growth objectives in India's dynamic market. Together, Tony and Jerry will shed light on challenges and opportunities in the Indian space sector, along with the critical legal policies and frameworks that will help in sustainable growth of this sector. Stay tuned as we explore how India's space tech ecosystem will help grow India's economy and also shape its global standing. Tony and Jerry, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
My first question, Tony, to you. What role do Indian space startups play in the global space economy, and how is India positioning itself as the leader in the sector?
Yeah, before I dwell with what startups are doing in the space sector, it may be good to know what the current economy is, globally as well as from the Indian context. The global economy, as far as the space economy is concerned, is about a $640 billion industry.
Yeah.
The projection is that it will grow up to $1.8 trillion by 2035.
Right.
Which is, a growth of about 9% per annum is what is projected.
Essentially tripling itself.
Yeah. Yes. So, and now coming into the Indian space economy, the Indian space economy is projected at about $8.4 billion in 2023.
Mm-hmm.
And its potential growth is slated at about $44 billion by 2033.
Right.
And obviously, for this kind of a growth, we need private players to play an important role in this growth. So, coming into startups as in general, the startup ecosystem is really large in India,
mm-hmm.
and has been fueled over the years by, fintech, edtech, agrotech,
right,
and autotech. These are the industries that we have seen which is fueling the startup sector. Now we are seeing, R&D and, AI and space tech, which is taking the mantle now, and they are considered as emerging sectors.
Right.
So obviously, startups are going to play a major role as far as, the improvement of the space economy in general, as well as the global space economy, because India has a significant role as far as the space economy in general is considered.
Mm-hmm.
Then, one of the interesting, numbers that we need to take into account is the startup culture as far as space technology really began in the last 2-3 years. It took a lot of impetus, as you may call it,
right,
in the last 2-3 years, where we saw one startup being established in 2022 to 200 startups by 2024.
Right.
And that is really a 200 times growth,
right,
in these few years. So that's a significant growth. And essentially what we are seeing is that there is a lot of partnering and collaboration with international space agencies for creating smaller satellites, launch systems, ground operational systems.
Right.
And these are the areas that startups are focusing on. And ISRO, which is the Indian Space Research Organization, has also been keenly playing a big role as far as supporting these startups by providing their expertise and also allowing them to use their facilities. So obviously, what we're going to see is that the startup culture in the space sector is going to grow significantly over the next few years.
Right.
And obviously, the intent of the government is to reach around 10% of the global space economy. So they are the ones who are going to fuel this going forward.
Very interesting. Gerald, Tony just mentioned that the global space industry is going to grow from 640 to 1.8 trillion. It's tripling in the next 10 years or 11 years. Whereas India's space industry is going to grow from 8.4 to 44 by 2033, which is 5xing. That means India is going to grow faster than the global pace, right? Can you help explain what have been the space advancements, space tech advancements that have contributed to India's GDP growth thus far? And, what does the future, look like over the next decade to fuel this 5x growth?
So, Jayanth, what we've really seen, and to add to a few points which Tony also mentioned, is that the value of investment which has taken place in the space sector,
right,
from a GDP concept, is much higher.
Okay.
So we're looking at a 60 billion value
right,
in terms of the GDP impact it has had.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Because given the economy of the country, given its agrarian setup, given that so many states of the country are still in very early stages of development,
right,
any kind of a value addition to this agrarian economy translates multifold.
Right.
And that is why you're looking at a 5x growth or
Right.
a 6x growth, right?
Right.
If I am able to direct a farmer to seed at a particular time by using all of this technology, okay, and if he is able to do it and if he is able to reap his harvest at the right time,
right,
then that translates into a huge value add to the economy.
Fair enough.
Right?
Yes.
So there is a congruent additional growth that will happen at all levels, if we have a robust, and we are already building a very robust space technology framework. We have a good space technology supporting and enabling, push by the government.
Right.
So that is obviously helping us, right? But also to specifically address, what are those technologies which have given India more visibility, right? I think the last 10 years have been a very interesting period for India, for ISRO.
Right.
The way we have been thinking about, getting out of the box and thinking about it, right? It is no more a sovereign asset. You build economies only when you are able to share the knowledge, share the technology, get young people involved in what you're doing.
Right.
ISRO traditionally has had, has been a very value-based organization, long-serving people, people with great passion for invention.
Right.
And ISRO is also known to be very frugal.
Yes. Yes.
You compare ISRO and NASA, in
Correct.
terms of their budgetary allocations, it's
I think
very far.
Not just our country, the entire world knows the Chandrayaan and the Mangalyaan stories.
Exactly.
Especially when it comes to numbers, right?
Absolutely. I was just coming to that, right? The Kolla, launch vehicles, the Kolla satellite,
PSLVs.
and then followed by, our Rohini satellites.
Right.
And then, of course, Chandrayaan and Mangalyaan really opened out people's mind globally, right? They realized that India has the potential.
Right.
And with the youngest minds at work, India having a large pool of young people and very smart individuals, I think there is tremendous potential in what India envisages in doing. And as you rightly said, and you also pointed out, every drop into this large economic aspiration that we have of making ourselves a multi-trillion economy, okay, or a developed economy, so to say, play a very important role. So, for example, today we have about 400 startups which are looking at space as an essential part of their development. And why has that happened? Because today they've realized that ISRO has opened doors. They've realized that the government is enabling, investments into it. The government is providing, budgetary allocations and funds to some of these startups to be able to, come up with innovation, build small satellites, the ones which Tony was speaking about.
Right.
And what is happening is the government is also looking at various options of maximizing an output from these startups, right? So you're doing scaling up of technology, scaling up of innovation, collaboration with other countries, other companies which are already pioneers in this space,
Right.
to try and derive technology, to try and get more inputs into bettering what they already have.
Right.
So that is already happening, right? So today, what you see is from the overall ecosystem, the space ecosystem, what you see these 400 odd startups doing in association with some of the older, bigger guys, right? So what is happening today with all these startups is that they are looking at multi-pronged approaches to build systems of value. Okay, for example, they're looking at satellite-based communications. There are some startups which are focusing on integration of satellites and testing facilities. All of that is happening now, right now in India.
Right.
Manufacturing of satellite subsystems, communication devices, and ground systems as well. ISRO has, to a very large extent, facilitated a lot of these startups to test their equipment and their products within the ISRO testing facility. So therefore, these guys are not scrounging for resources.
Right.
There is an efficient use of what is available. We may not have the best, but that is being put to good use now.
Right.
Some of the initiatives of sandboxing for specific requirements have also started at the ISRO level, at the in-space level. And that adds a lot of value. And in fact, Tony, I'm sure, will speak a little more about in-space and NSIL and all the good work that they are doing. And I think there is a lot more space mentorship that is happening now in the country. People are open to the idea, when maybe about 10, 15 years ago, when you went and spoke to our very early pioneers in this field of space promotion and space as a business, we looked at them quite suspiciously, what really are these guys doing?
Right.
But now we experience that reality.
Very
We
interesting.
see what they're doing. We see how a particular client, a particular company is enabling farmers.
Nice.
We know that they're able to identify crop seasons so efficiently. They are sending, real-time messages via WhatsApp messages and SMSs to their farmer community, telling them that this is what you can do. There's going to be bad rainfall this week, so avoid doing what you want to do.
Right.
Do it next week. So these are really progressive things that are happening, which we are able to experience at ground zero.
Very interesting.
One of the points that I wanted to mention is I forgot to mention the numbers. As far as the government's commitment, as far as the space technology in the sector is concerned, the allocation of budget for this budget has been 13,000 crores.
Wow.
Which is nearly 490 crores from the last budget.
Okay.
So that itself shows
490 crores extra more.
Yeah. So that itself shows the commitment of the government as far as their interest in developing this sector and trying to improve the skills that we have.
Right.
Obviously, it's a reality today. We know, at least in the last 2 decades, that we have lost a lot of our scientists to NASA. So we have to bring up our system to that extent where we have to live with what skills that
Right.
So that's what the government is supporting in. So that's an interesting phase we are looking at least in the next 10 years.
Very interesting. Tony, Gerald talked about the agrarian sector, right? I mean, and India is evolving from an agrarian to a services sector. I'm sure the space tech and the satellite imagery will have a lot more contribution to different applications there. I mean, be it logistics, infrastructure, or whatever, right? Both of you have talked about, the government's various government initiatives, okay, to support the space sector and space technology's growth. What are the different regulatory frameworks that are in place for non-governmental entities currently?
Yeah, so we have seen a significant change, at least in the 1.5 year, as far as non-governmental entities would concern. because obviously ISRO was the key player as far as India is concerned
Right.
in the space sector. So we saw a lot of changes as far as policies go. The FDI norms relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
We had the introduction of the new Telecom Act,
Okay.
and there were conditions laid out in the Telecom Act as to how space spectrum be allocated.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the key topics today of discussion, because space communication is going to be the future as far as communication is concerned. And the spectrum allocation for that is through the administrative process as per the new Telecom Act.
Right.
Although we have some of the large private players knocking on the government's door saying that please allocate it on auction based.
Right.
But I guess the government is looking at the overall picture of it and ensuring that they need to support even smaller players, international players entering the market, because we have a lot of international players knocking at our doors to enter the market. There has been, the government's support in opening up the sector significantly for the private players.
Mm-hmm.
We have seen the FDI norms change. We have seen the introduction of the new enactments. And also the constitution of the Indian National Space Promotion Authorization Center, which is InSpace, which was constituted in 2020. Basically, InSpace has the role of authorizing space-related activities which concern either launch of satellites, authorizing private players to enter the market to have their own satellites in the Indian orbit. There is a combination, as you know, we have geo satellites, we have LEO satellites, and there is a lot of talk about LEO satellites because that's the easiest possible launches, which is very, very close to the Earth's surface. So that's somewhere, there's a lot of interest even from international players. Especially if you see Elon Musk has been talking a lot about LEO satellites as well.
Right.
And of course, India has played a lot of role in the geo satellites as well, because geo satellites are some of the new satellites which are more, have heavier payloads, which they are stationed at a certain orbit where you really don't need the radars to move around.
Ground control, because they're geosynchronous.
So they move with the Earth. So that's a very significant growth, as you may see it. And of course, the role of InSpace has become very significant because it collaborates between the ISRO as well as the private players.
Okay.
And basically, they have brought in, the norms, guidelines, and procedures for authorizing space-related activities. And there is a process of applying for these authorizations from InSpace, which they have prescribed.
Right.
And also certain procedures that have been prescribed on which has to be complied with by non-governmental entities.
Okay.
So that's where we are seeing as far as development in the last 2-3 years in the space sector from a regulatory standpoint.
Very interesting. Gerald, Tony talked about how the Indian government laid a good foundation to ensure and make it conducive for foreign companies to come and launch and grow in India in the Indian space sector, right? Including the formulation of InSpace 4 years ago in 2020. But how does India's involvement in the international space partnership, like G20's Space Economic Leaders Meeting, influence its space policy and collaborations globally?
I think it's a good question, because a lot of what Tony has also spoken about, the effervescence of this whole ecosystem now, comes from a very focused leadership and initiative by the government to make their presence felt in the global space arena. We have been there. I'm not saying that we haven't been there. But today, the buoyancy of so many startups, the availability of the technology, the enthusiasm of our young entrepreneurs is also in some way, adding that combustion fuel, so to say, where the government where the government is saying, hey, you know what? Let us make ourselves more evident. So with the G20, India's presidency of the G20, leadership event which happened in India last year, and India, taking on the leadership in the G20 Space Economy Leaders Meeting, I think was a pivotal position for India. It was like a watershed moment, if you ask me, so far as a space narrative is concerned. Because what is happening is that entire sessions, the entire SLEM sessions were held in Bangalore. ISRO, kind of hosted the whole thing. We had about 18 or 19 G20 countries participating. We had one international organization which participated, in these sessions. And plus, there must have been about 20 or 30 startups which also participated. So it was very unique for them. And what was India saying there? India was largely focusing on India's narrative in those discussions were very clear, right? So they were saying economy, responsibility, and alliance. These were really the key, themes of the real theme of the whole discussion. And why is it important for India to position itself that way? Currently, India, contributes about 2 to 3% of the global space economy. We are expecting it to get to 10% maybe in the next 10 years. And I think it's possible. But what is really important is that currently, the entire space infrastructure, the space vision statement for the globe is inherently written by the P5 countries. India is not a party to it.
Right.
And what is happening because of that is even the United Nations organization, there are two organizations which are focused on space collaboration and space affairs, largely align with what the P5 countries are saying.
Okay.
So for India to be able to bat effectively on that pitch, to send a message very clearly that, listen, we also need to know, we also want to participate, and we are willing to contribute as well. So that makes a difference, right? So if you look at what India's narrative there has been is that we want to have responsible space exploration. We want to make sure that there is proper management and, dealing with space debris.
Right.
We want to make sure that knowledge is shared, technology is available. We are able to partner with each other so that we are able to address very key concerns like global warming, climate change, things which will alleviate poverty. These are some of the very core themes that India discussed at that event.
Right.
Okay. And what also tends to happen, it is important for India to be a vocal player here. So why these conversations become important is because, for example, when US launched the Psyche mission, where they wanted to explore an asteroid because it apparently had extremely good valuable metals and minerals. Now, what is going to be the consequence of the exploration and the exploitation of an asteroid of that nature to the whole world as a whole? Okay, then you had the US mission, which is known as the Copernicus, which was obviously doing a whole load of surveillance on international borders, EU borders.
Yes,
and has a sense of a threat in neighboring countries. And then you also had this program from China, which was the anti-missile, the anti-satellite missile program, which was rather scary. So when you know that these ideas are developing in the international, space world, it is important for India, not only in terms of being able to protect its own space, protect its own, resources, space resources. It is important for India to know what is happening in and among the P5 nations. Because if you are not there, if you're not being vocal there, a lot of things can happen over which we will absolutely have no control.
Right.
Which could, at some point of time, impair upon our own security, our own sovereignty. So I think to that extent, from being the voice there, in this space arena, I think it really makes sense for India to be there, for India to be heard, for India to send out the right messages. And I think we have done that extremely well with the G20 summit last year. And there is only going to be more opportunities for India.
Right.
Given the collaborations that we've already started. I mean, we've had a long-term collaborations with some of the other international space organizations.
Yeah.
But today, what these international space organizations or companies like, an Amazon or what they are beginning to see in India is that India has the potential to contribute.
Right.
We have the potential to contribute to their systems, to their technologies. We may not be able to, set up a propulsion rocket overnight. Right? But we have the technology and the resources and the talent available today to make essential components which will make all of that happen. We have the ability to write the most complicated code,
Nice.
be able to launch those rockets in the most, in an appropriate manner. So they value that talent in India. And they're also beginning to see that a lot of this talent is now getting retained in India thanks to startups.
Yeah.
Thanks to startups. The entrepreneurial spirit at several levels is beginning to slowly see the retention of good talent in India.
Very nice.
And so what is happening is that these companies and these agencies today are saying, why not India? Okay, so India is definitely on their map for, research, for collaboration, for joint exercises, for testing. And that is making all the difference. No? So on one side, you have the industry which is propelling itself.
Right.
And on the other side, you have the government which is making all the right noises. So I think therefore, I think the space economy for India is going to really be, a big value addition. It is going to bring in a lot of value. And for all you know, GCC is the flavor of today's discussion generally.
Yes.
India, we could have space GCCs in India, with high quality engineers and great testing facilities. It's absolutely possible.
Very interesting.
Another important element which I'd like to add there is also the cost.
Yeah.
You compare the cost, we are very cost efficient.
Correct.
And that's been the norm as far as our satellite sector, space sector is concerned.
Correct. So, now, Gerald, you make a very interesting point about the talent in India, because in the context of artificial intelligence, last month, Eric Schmidt, the former CEO of Google, was giving a speech at Stanford, and he said exactly the same thing. He says, India, he was talking about the geopolitics of AI. In that context, he was talking about the AI innovation and growth in America and then China. And then he said, India, according to me, is the swing state. He says that Indian AI engineers are actually, helping the advancements of AI. The great, the seminal Transformers paper, two of the key authors were Indians. Okay. And he says that, India, we should attract some of Indian talent, but India should also retain a lot of its talent. Okay. And we should provide that ecosystem. So it's great to hear that even in the space tech sector, okay, we are seeing that kind of talent that you are saying is available. And, India is now, the ecosystem with the government and the startup ecosystem are now able to retain that talent. Okay. That's very interesting. Tony, you talked about the cost, okay? Very interesting. And you also, in your earlier response, you talked about PSLVs, right? What has been the impact of development of low-cost, launch vehicles like, PSLVs on the global perception of India's space capabilities?
So as you are aware, one of the key aspects for ISRO to succeed has always been the low-cost launches that they have been doing over the years. And PSLV, which started off in 1990, was one of their key launch vehicles, which has been used over the years and has been very successful because of its reliability for placing, various satellites in various orbits. And that's one of the key aspects which has held ISRO's, competitive edge over the other players in the globally. So I think what has been the role of ISRO is that they've been very cost effective.
Mm-hmm.
They have been having certain cutting edge technologies coming into play. And one of the key elements which I was also discussing with Gerald on my way to office is that our scientists do not get paid that much as far as NASA scientists. So obviously there's a cost factor there that adds to it. So because of which it's very cost efficient, and the launches are very cost efficient. So if you were to compare the launch of a PSLV to that of a NASA launch, it's nearly 1/4 the cost.
Right.
So a PSLV costs about 15 million per launch, and NASA would easily cost about 60 million.
Right.
So there's a huge difference.
Yeah.
And that's been one of the key aspects as far as the Indian space sector would be concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And also, the government's intention of setting up its own space station.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the Bharatiya Antariksha Station.
Okay.
So I'm sorry, the
Self-explanatory, right? For anyone who
some
can
of
see
these
the
Hindi terms, I kind of get stuck there. But yeah, I mean, that's a big vision of the government to have its own space,
its own space station. Yeah.
and also to have a moon mission, a crewed moon mission by
Right.
2040. These are all major, impact that is going to have in the space sector in general. So I guess the government's focus has always been to ensure that they are able to compete with a NASA or with a SpaceX. That's the intention here. While we may not be, our launch vehicles may not match the payloads or may not match the efficiency of some of these players, but they have been successful in their missions.
Right.
And that's what matters ultimately.
Yeah.
So that's where we
The success rate has been quite high comparatively. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's where I think, the low-cost missions have played a big role
Right.
in the Indian space sector.
Right. And we do get a lot of respect because of that in the international community.
Absolutely. And today, even foreign players want, our satellites to launch their satellites into the orbit.
Right.
So we have had a lot of tie-ups, say, with Singapore, with smaller nations.
Right.
So which has helped us significantly capture at least the Southeast East Asian markets.
Makes sense.
That's where it is.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I think that's an important point.
Yeah.
So now the whole vision statement of having a new generation launch vehicle,
Right.
right, and saying that it's going to be more efficient, 3 times the payload.
Right.
Now, when the government sets out a mission like that, a vision statement like that, it obviously encourages the entire ecosystem to look forward to something.
Correct.
And currently, we've been quite efficient with smaller satellite payloads, launching them, quite efficiently. But if we were to have something more robust, a larger payload capacity, that is going to bring in a phenomenal amount of, money into our systems.
Right. Right.
So I think that way, that vision statement is very, very good, is what I feel.
No, it's very interesting because when it comes to space technology, only a couple of things that come to any average citizen's mind is that it's high tech in nature. It's very research oriented, and it obviously contributes to the pride of the nation. And the applications of it will be seen in different industries. But launching itself as a market or as an industry, is nobody thinks about that. Not even entrepreneurs, right? And that's where some of these different countries, especially the Southeast Asian countries, looking at India, for launching their satellites, and that contributing to the revenue, is a market and industry that no one thinks about, and that's a very interesting angle actually.
Yeah.
So, Gerald, in one of the earlier response, you did talk about a couple of examples and case studies of how the space solutions are helping in the agricultural sector, right? Yeah. Can you elaborate on that and talk about how some of these space-based solutions are enhancing critical infrastructure management in India, along with agriculture, a couple of other sectors, including energy and transportation as well?
So I think what is happening is, if you look at a lot of our our satellites which are currently on the geostationary orbit, or also on the lower LEO, our LEO orbits, right? What we are beginning to see is that they have sent in a lot of data,
right?
In terms of rainfall, change in weather patterns, and of course, as I told you, those forecasts have really helped the country to plan multiple aspects, right? One is obviously, the agrarian activities, agricultural activities. It has helped us to plan our construction activity, infrastructure build activity, right? So there is you have better visuals which are provided by some of these satellites in terms of the topography, lay of the land. It makes survey easier,
right?
It gives greater visibility for an engineer to be able to build something. And now India is, all out on its road projects and its, in so many infrastructure projects currently which are on airports, ports, roads, there is a lot of inputs that are received thanks to our satellites which are deployed out there, in addition to that, what is happening is that climate change, disaster management, related information is also near accurate, very, very useful. So, for example, a few months ago when we heard about the Orissa, the threat of the Orissa floods, the government was able to use this machinery to move, a whole large number of people, away from the disaster zones, thereby, completely preventing the loss of life. Of course, there would be, loss of, material stuff, but there is obviously, restoration and prevention of loss of life. So some of these aspects, play an important role, which affects us as individuals.
Right.
Now, in terms of air traffic, logistics, again, a lot of our satellites do provide that information quite well. I think a lot of our aviation industries have now started relying on data which is being provided by Indian satellites, as opposed to them having had to pay huge amounts of money earlier to the foreign service providers. So these are some of the developments that we have seen, the value additions that we have seen.
So great. Audience, thank you for joining us for this episode of Transforming India. We hope you gained some valuable insights around the opportunities, challenges, and also the policy frameworks, when it comes to the space sector in India. I'd like to, especially thank our guests, Tony and Gerald, for sharing their expertise on legal frameworks and policies. Stay tuned for our next episode as we continue to explore the transformative changes propelling India towards a prosperous future and towards a $30 trillion economy by 2047. Thank you.
Thank you so much.